أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله لقد جاءت رسل ربنا بالحق ونودوا أن تلكم الجنة ورثتموها بما كنتم تعملون والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا وحبيب قلوبنا السراج المنير المصطفى الأمجد أبا القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين وعلى أصحابه الميامين. أما بعد، يقول الله في محكم التنزيل: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وإذا لقوكم قالوا آمنا وإذا خلوا عضوا عليكم الأنامل من الغيظ قل موتوا بغيظكم إن الله عليم بذات الصدور. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Anger is a universal emotion, and we all express anger to a certain degree in our daily life. We tend to be angry when we're sitting in traffic for a long period of time. We get irritated, and eventually we get angry. Maybe sometimes we make obscene gestures. We get angry at people who take our perceived right. Let's say they cut us off in traffic, or they do something to irritate us. So anger is a universal emotion that's often felt, but oftentimes the problem lies when we mismanage or when we become extremely angry. And this ayah that I recited for you, it occurs in Surah Al-Imran. It's ayah number 119, and really has a very graphic description of anger. And it's worth noting and worth describing in detail, and then we'll get into the main subject of tonight's topic. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here is describing the munafiqeen, and He's describing the non-believers. He's describing their emotional state of mind. And He says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَإِذَا لَقُوكُمْ قَالُوا آمَنَّا. And when they're with you, they say, we believe. When they're with you, these munafiqeen, these hypocrites, when they're sitting with the Prophet, when they're sitting with the believers, they say, we believe. وَإِذَا خَلُوا عَضُوا عَلَيْكُمُ الْأَنَامِلِ مِنَ الْغَيْظِ. But when they leave you, they're seething with rage. And in fact, they're so angry that they're biting their fingers. That's what the Quran is telling us. عَضُوا عَلَيْكُمُ الْأَنَامِلَ مِنَ الْغَيْظِ. They're so angry that they're biting the fingertips, that they're seething in rage. قُلْ مُوتُوا بِغَيْظِكُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, die in your anger. إِنَّ اللَّهَ عَلِيمٌ بِذَاتِ الصُّدُورِ. This ayah is really important for two fundamental reasons. First, the first important reason, shukran, jazakallah khair. The first important reason is here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is contrasting the non-believers to the believers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that the non-believers, the hypocrites, and those who don't believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are angry people. They're angry people. They're so angry that they're biting the tips of their fingers off. Whereas the believers, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala contrasts them later in Surah Al-Imran, الَّذِينَ يُنْفِقُونَ فِي السَّرَّاءِ وَالضَّرَّاءِ وَالْكَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظَ وَالْعَافِينَ عَنِ النَّاسِ وَاللَّهُ يُحِبُّ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. The believers are those who spend in good times and in bad times, and they're the ones who can manage their anger in an appropriate manner. كَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظَ. They can hold their anger, they can manage their anger. So later on in Surah Al-Imran, in ayah number 124, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the believers. It says the believers, unlike the non-believers, they can control their anger, they can manage their anger. So the first thing that the surah is trying to contrast for us is that the non-believers are angry, the believers are not angry, and in fact they have good anger management skills. That's the first important part of this ayah. The second important part of this ayah is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلْ مُوتُوا بِغَيْظِكُمْ. Die in your anger. Meaning your anger will eventually lead to your death. Now why is this important? Recently there was a landmark study called the Inter-Heart Study. Inter, I-N-T-E-R, Heart Study. What this study was an analysis of 25,000 people across 52 different countries. And they examined different risk factors for heart disease. They found which risk factors lead to greatest amount of heart disease. So they found that there were 9 categories of risk factors that lead to heart diseases like heart attacks and coronary vascular disease and what have you. And what they found is that one of the most important risk factors for death, for premature heart attacks, is anger. In fact, anger is a more important risk factor than type 2 diabetes, than obesity, and is just as important as smoking cigarettes. Anger is like smoking a pack of cigarettes. If you are not able to manage your anger, it'll lead to premature death, and it'll lead to other quality of life issues. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, قُلْ مُوتُوا بِغَيْظِكُمْ, this is a physiological fact. People who are unable to manage their anger will eventually suffer a premature death. Maybe a cardiac event, maybe some stroke, maybe a heart attack. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making it very clear that emotions affect our long-term quality of life, and more importantly, that anger is something that differentiates the believer between the non-believer. So last night we started our discussion about emotions. Over the next 2 or 3 nights, we're going to talk about the negative emotions that both affect us on a physical level and, more importantly, affect us on a spiritual level. Because the physical and the spiritual are tightly interlinked. As Imam Ali alayhi salam reminds us, إِنَّ الْعَقْلَ السَّلِيمِ بِالْجِسْمِ السَّلِيمِ, that the sound mind is in the physically sound body. So Imam Ali alayhi salam is making this important link, which now modern medicine and modern science are understanding. That emotions affect us on a physical level, and they affect us on a social and even on a spiritual level. So it seems that to be a good Muslim, to be a good mu'min, you need to have good anger management skills. So that's why we'll be talking about anger. Because number one of the characteristics of a believer is that they're able to control their anger. كَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظِ. Just to give you one more graphic hadith of Imam Sadik alayhi salam. Imam Sadik alayhi salam says, الْغَضَبُ يُفْسِدُ الْإِيمَانَ كَمَا يُفْسِدُ الْخَلِّ الْعَسَلِ. So anger, al-ghadab, yufsidu al-iman, it spoils the faith, it spoils iman, just like vinegar spoils honey. Imam Sadik alayhi salam is comparing iman or belief in Allah to honey. It's something which is good, something which is beneficial. But anger is like vinegar. Have you ever mixed vinegar with honey? It's nasty. You wouldn't want to eat it. But that's what happens when you're angry. You're mixing the good thing, the iman, with vinegar, which is something which is bitter and which is sour. So Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq here is saying that if you mix anger with your iman, you're going to have something which is spoiled, something which is not good. So that's the second reason that we want to talk about iman, because it's one of the important factors that affects our closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we're unable to manage our anger, then we will inevitably be turned away from the belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We'll turn towards the example of shaitan. The third reason that I wanted to talk about anger is because these days, Muslims unfortunately have been associated with anger. And I just wanted to show you a couple of statistics that should display the point, and then we'll talk about these issues in more detail. Muslims have been associated with anger these days, and it really all goes back to this article which appeared in The Atlantic. It's called The Roots of Muslim Rage. This article appeared in 1990. It was by a man named Bernard Lewis. Bernard Lewis is one of the leading so-called experts on Islamic studies. And he's actually the inventor of the idea of the clash of civilizations. Well, back in 1990, Bernard Lewis came up with this article, which is a very influential article that many policymakers often refer to. It's called The Roots of Muslim Rage. And he says that Muslims, their religion makes them more angry. So it's sort of like a national security threat that we need to be aware of. Islam leads Muslims to become more angry, and this anger can lead to more terrorist attacks and can be a security risk for the United States. Just how influential is this article? I did a Google search, and I typed in the word Muslim rage, and then I looked at other religions just to see how many hits I would get. And really the results were staggering. When you type in Muslim rage into Google, and I did this yesterday, you find that there are about 90,000 hits for Muslim rage, compared to 20,000 hits for Christian rage, about 1,000 hits for Jewish rage, about 800 hits for Hindu rage, and almost nothing for Buddhist rage. So it seems that people associate Buddhism with more peaceful religion. If you type in the word Muslim anger, you'll see almost 250,000 hits associating Islam with anger. Whereas Christian anger is around 50,000, Jewish anger is around 2,000, Hindu anger is around 3,000, and Buddhist anger again it really doesn't show up. So the third reason we're talking about anger here tonight is to answer the question, are Muslims more angry than other religions? Because this is an important issue that keeps popping up again and again. They say Muslims are angry, and this anger is what's going to lead to increased terrorist attacks. So tonight's discussion will really fall into three major parts, if we have time, inshallah, because we don't want to delay the reading of the Quran and the game show. But we'll try to cover these aspects in the next minutes. The first question that we want to answer is, what are the two major causes of anger as listed by the Quran? We want to see what the Quran tells us about anger. We want to see what the Ahlul Bayt tell us about the anger through the example of the Prophet and the Imams. The second question we want to answer is, what are the solutions to anger? And we're going to look at the non-Islamic solutions, specifically the solutions suggested by the American Psychological Association. And then we want to look at the Islamic solutions towards anger. And then the third question that we want to answer is, are Muslims more angry than other religions? And we're going to try to answer this from a historical and from a modern statistical perspective. Are Muslims more angry than other religions? So inshallah, give me a loud salawat so we can continue with the discussion. So what are the major sources of anger? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Shura, He describes the source of anger very beautifully, one of the first sources of anger. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes a bit of time to lead to the cause, one of the major causes of anger. So this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And this is ayah number 36 in Surah Al-Shura. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. فَمَا أُوتِيتُم مِّن شَيْءٍ فَمَتَاعُ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. And whatever you're given is simply the mata' of this hayat ad-dunya, simply a practical tool of this hayat ad-dunya. And remember, the other day we described that the ancient Arabs, they used to call mata', it's a brush that they used to wash the dishes with. So it's a practical object. So whatever you're given in this world is simply a practical object of this dunya. وَمَا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ خَيْرٌ وَأَبْقَى لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. And whatever is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is khayrun wa abqa. It's much better, and it's longer lasting, it's everlasting compared to what you find in this dunya. لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. But it's only for those people who believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and sort of depend on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the first thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us here is that this dunya is temporary. What is with Allah is permanent. But you have to believe in Allah. You have to make that leap of faith that what Allah is going to give you is much better than what you're currently being given in this dunya. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues, وَالَّذِينَ يَجْتَنِبُونَ كَبَائِرَ الْإِثْمِ. And those who avoid the major sins, those who avoid adultery, those who avoid stealing, those who avoid fornication, those who avoid the major sins, وَالَّذِينَ يَجْتَنِبُونَ كَبَائِرَ الْإِثْمِ وَالْفَوَاحِشَ وَإِذَا مَا غَضِبُوا هُمْ يَغْفِرُونَ. And those who avoid the fawahish, the bad deeds. And when they're angry, they forgive. The word here is يَغْفِرُونَ. The word here is they forgive. And I'm going to describe the word ghafr as it compares to afu later on. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making it very clear that those who depend on this dunya will be more likely to be angry. Why is that? Because they don't believe in what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them. They think that if they lose something in this dunya, that's it. That's the end of the situation. So if someone takes away maybe their job that they believed was owed to them, if someone takes away a position that they believe was owed to them, they don't believe in the thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to give them. So they're more likely to be enraged. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala contrasts the non-believers with those who believe, because they're the people الَّذِينَ يَجْتَنِبُونَ كَبَائِرَ الْإِثْمِ وَالْفَوَاحِشَ وَإِذَا مَا غَضِبُوا هُمْ يَغْفِرُونَ. And because when they're angry, they tend to forgive. Now what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mean here? Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that depending on this dunya is really one of the major sources of anger. And that's why Imam Ali alayhi salam says, إِيَّاكَ وَحُبِّ الدُّنْيَا. Beware of the love of this world. فَإِنَّهَا أَصْلُ كُلَّ خَطِيئَةٍ وَمَعْدَنَ كُلَّ بَلِيَّةٍ. Because it is the source of every transgression And it is the source of every mismanagement and every wrong action that an individual does. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that those who depend on this dunya are more likely to commit the fahsha, to commit the munkar, and they're more likely to be angry. Why are they more likely to be angry? Because when they lose something in this dunya, they lose perspective of the hereafter. They don't know that there's going to be a heaven, or even if an injustice is committed to them, they tend to be less likely to forgive and to overlook. Whereas those who believe are those who believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why they know that whatever is given to them by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be better than whatever they've lost here in this dunya. So that's the first major cause of anger. The first major cause is those who depend on this dunya. Now you may be saying, okay, well I believe in heaven, I believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but I'm still getting angry. What's the reason for my anger? This ayah is maybe referring to those who don't believe. But I believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and yet I'm still getting angry on a daily basis. What's the source of my anger? Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the source of the anger of the believers. In Surah Al-Imran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا تَفَرَّقُوا إِلَّا مِن بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَهُمَ الْعِلْمَ بَغْيًا بَيْنَهُم. He says, for those who believe, the second cause of anger is self-righteousness. Self-righteousness. What is self-righteousness? It's when you believe that you have the right position and you try to dominate others with your opinion, with your particular set of beliefs. So let's say you believe something and someone else doesn't believe your idea. Well, you're going to be angry because you're going to try to convince that other person with your words. And sometimes in dialogue, people tend to get heated. So self-righteousness is the second cause of anger. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا تَفَرَّقُوا إِلَّا مِن بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَهُمَ الْعِلْمُ بَغْيًا بَيْنَهُم. They only became divided after the ilm has been revealed to them. After they received the revelation, they became divided. Why did they become divided? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the word بَغْيًا بَيْنَهُم. Baghi is both the cause of their transgression, the cause of their anger, and the mode that they express their anger. What do I mean? Baghi comes from the Arabic word which means to dominate. It also means arrogance or filled with selfishness. So it's an urge to dominate other people. So you've all been in this kind of a situation. Let's say you get into a religious argument with your fellow Muslim brother, you get into a religious argument with your fellow Muslim sister, and then things become heated very quickly. Why is that? Because the source of that anger is self-righteousness. You think that your opinion is correct and their opinion is wrong, and you're going to try to dominate the other person by any means necessary. And we've seen this all the time, this attitude of self-righteousness. When people say, oh look at her hijab. It's not really 100% Islamic. Or look at this guy, he doesn't even have a beard. How does he think he's a Muslim? These small little things. Oh, this guy does taqleed of so-and-so. He's not a real Muslim. Or this guy does so-and-so. We see this tendency to be self-righteous among believers. What is the cause of this self-righteousness? It's a cause dominated by arrogance, by pride, thinking your opinion is better than the opinion of others. And subhanAllah, it's amazing. We Muslims, we tend to argue with each other and try to dominate each other more than at work. So I see Muslim people, in the masjid, they're arguing with each other and they're yelling and they're trying to dominate each other. But then at work, they're very nice, they're very gentle. And it's like, hold on, is this the same person that was causing the fitna in the masjid? Now he's at work and now he's all humble and, working properly. So we tend to be more forgiving of non-Muslims than Muslims, which is a great tragedy. So what is the two major sources of anger? The two major sources of anger, out of many, are both a attachment to this dunya, and the second source of anger is self-righteousness. Baghi, meaning you're trying to dominate the other person because thinking that you have the better opinion and you're trying to convince the other person with anger and by any means necessary. So what is the solution to anger? The solution to anger, really there are several solutions to anger. And if we turn to the American Psychological Association, they have a booklet called Controlling Anger Before It Controls You. They have 3 solutions that they recommend. The first solution is that you can express anger in an assertive manner, meaning taking your anger and rather than expressing it in an aggressive manner, by going and yelling at someone or swearing at someone or cursing at someone, you try to refocus that into positive energy. So that, maybe you go out and you play sports. If you're angry, you go play basketball, or you go swim, or you go do something like that. But here the point being that you still maintain your anger, but you channel the anger in a positive way. That's the solution recommended by the American Psychological Association. Another solution is to hold in your anger, meaning you're angry, but you hold it in. They say this is all right, but sometimes it's bad because some people, they hold in their anger, but then they express their anger in a passive-aggressive manner. What does passive-aggressive manner mean? Meaning they don't show you they're angry, but they try to undermine you at every step of the way. So, you do something bad to me, and you anger me, and I say, yeah, I forgive you, but then I do something behind your back in a passive-aggressive manner. Or I try to say something to you in a passive-aggressive way. I show myself not being angry at you, but I'm still angry at you, but I go behind your back and I display my anger in non-constructive, non-productive ways. The third solution is to calm down inside. And they say, you can control your heart rate, your blood pressure, things of that nature. So these are the three major solutions of the American Psychological Association. What does Islam say? Islam takes a different take from what the American Psychological Association does. So to understand the Islamic position, we'll discuss it by looking at the example of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet. But first, give me a loud salawat. What Islam recommends is not holding in your anger, is not to express anger in an assertive manner. What Islam recommends is going to the root source of your anger, and importantly, changing your perspective on the world, meaning recognizing your position in the grand creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because when you recognize your own subservient position to Allah, there's really not going to be an urge or a need to dominate others. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says very clearly, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Ya ayyuhan nasu antum al-fuqara'u ila Allah, wallahu huwa al-ghaniyyu al-hamid. O people, you are the ones who are subservient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah is al-Ghani al-Hamid, meaning Allah is free of all wants and worthy of all. Meaning your perspective, you may get angry, but remember your position in the grand universe is that you're still a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you have no right to express your anger in a non-constructive way against someone who has just simply irritated you or done you wrong. And really to understand this concept of changing your perspective, we need to understand two of the 99 names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So again, as I mentioned, every night we'll be talking about one or two of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For as the hadith reminds us, Man arafa nafsah arafa rabbah. When you know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know yourself. Meaning when you know yourself, you'll know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the way we know ourselves is through the attributes and the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what are two of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala relating to anger? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inna Allah kana afuwan ghafura. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is afu and is ghafur. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is both forgiving. Afu and ghafur are two words for meaning forgiving, but they mean slightly different things. Ghafur means someone who forgives and hides the faults of others. Forgives, the forgiver and the hider of faults. It comes from the word ghafara, which means to veil or to cover. So ghafur means when you're angry at someone, you forgive them, but you still remember their fault, but you cover for it. You don't go out into society and you tell people, oh, this person did this to me, this person did that to me. Afu, on the other hand, means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives, but He wipes out any trace of the sin completely. Meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives and forgets. Afu, it means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wipes out the traces of sin completely. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala removes the sins from the record. And He also does not make you feel ashamed for committing that act. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is afu and is ghafur. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ghafur and is afu. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not only eliminates the sin, He not only forgives you the sin, but He'll eliminate it completely from your slate. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can forgive and can forget, then how about us? What does Islam tell the mu'mineen and the mu'minat? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again in Surah Ash-Shura uses the word afu. Listen to the word that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَجَزَاءُ سَيِّئَةٍ سَيِّئَةٌ مِثْلُهَا. And the response for an evil deed is a sayyi'ah mithlaha. It's an evil deed just like it. فَمَنْ عَفَى وَأَصْلَحَ فَأَجْرَهُ عَلَى اللَّهِ. What word does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala use here? Afa, not فَمَنْ غَفَرْ, فَمَنْ عَفَى وَأَصْلَحْ فَأَجْرَهُ عَلَى اللَّهِ. So whoever forgives and forgets and then tries to make a good connection with other people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give him his reward. إِنَّهُ لَا يُحِبُّ الظَّالِمِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not love those who commit injustice. And then we have the example of the Prophet. Listen to the words that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses for what the Prophet did whenever he treated people, whenever someone angered him, how the Prophet treated that individual. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This is again in Surah Al-Imran. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. فَمَا بِرَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ. And it is only through a mercy of Allah that you were merciful to them. So it is only through Allah's mercy that you were gentle to them. لِنْتَ لَهُمْ. وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. And if you were hard-hearted, your companions would have gone away from you. Your companions would have run away from you. But it is because of the rahmah and the mercy of Allah that you're gentle for them. And how does the Prophet respond to the people who anger them? فَاعْفُوا عَنْهُمْ فَاعْفُوا عَنْهُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here is using the word afu, meaning forgive them and forget about their past deeds. وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لَهُمْ. And then also make dua for them. اسْتَغْفِرْ لَهُمْ. So anyone who's made you angry, forgive and forget, and then make dua for them. فَاسْتَغْفِرْ لَهُمْ وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ. And more than that, go to them for their advice, just to show them that there's still good relations. Now, of course, the Prophet, he doesn't need advice from people because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guided him in the best of manners. But here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us a role for behavior. He says, أَعْفُوا لَهُمْ, and then make dua for them, and then go and ask them for their advice to show them that the relations are still good. فَإِذَا عَزَمْتَ فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُتَوَكِّلِينَ. And when you come to a decision, go and base your actions on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves those who base their actions on them. Look at the beautiful advice that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us about the Prophet and how we can implement it in our daily life. The perspective that we should implement whenever we get angry at someone is really a 3-stage perspective. Number 1, we forgive and we forget. Number 2, we make dua for the person who has wronged us or has made us angry. And number 3, we try to maintain some relations. Even if it's not the best of relations, we still try to talk to them. Now, how often do we see this in our communities, particularly among the followers of Ahlul Bayt? You know, we always remember the example of Imam Ali alayhi salam at the Battle of Khandaq, when he was facing Amr bin Abu Wid, you know, the fighter for the Quraysh. And Amr bin Abu Wid, he was on the ground and Imam Ali was about to kill him with his sword, but then Amr spits in the face of Imam Ali. And Imam Ali alayhi salam walks away from Amr, and then he comes back and kills him. And then the people on the other side said, well, why did you walk away from Amr? He spit in your face. He said, exactly. It's because he spit in my face. If I would have killed him at that moment, it would have been an act of personal anger. But I was killing him for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I needed to walk away, cool down, and then go back. Look at the perspective of Imam Ali alayhi salam. But how often do we see this kind of perspective in our communities? If someone just doesn't say salam to us, we become angry and we want to fight the person. If someone gives us a wrong look, we want to fight that person. Whereas the example of the Prophet and the Imams show us the best of conducts. So what we can conclude here is that anger is really due to 2 major causes. One of them is dependence on this dunya. The second is self-righteousness. What is the solution to anger? The solution to anger is changing your perspective in life. Changing the way that you think you should be treated. Because remember, even if someone mistreats you, it doesn't matter. Because you're still a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're not better than anyone else. You're not worse than anyone else. Remember that kind of attitude. And this, by the way, is probably the most difficult thing to do. I can tell you to forgive. I can tell you to forget. But it's something that requires practice. It's a lifelong procedure. It's a lifelong process. It's not something that you can do in one day. It's not something that you can do in one night. But it's something that evolves over time. And let me just give you this quote. This quote is from a book called How God Changes Your Brain. It's by a researcher at the University of Pennsylvania named Andy Newberg. Andrew Newberg talks about anger. And he says anger is the worst emotion that mankind has been given. Why is that? Because anger, and I'll just read you this quote real quick, because it's really, I think it's quite illustrative of what we've been talking about here. Give me a loud salawat. He says, of all the emotions we are born with, anger is the most difficult one to control. Anger controls the functioning of your brain. Anger also releases a cascade of chemicals that actually destroy parts of your brain. When you're angry, parts of your brain are actually being destroyed by the release of various neurochemicals. So what does he recommend? This is a Jewish guy over at the University of Pennsylvania, School of Medicine. He recommends the following, and it's subhanAllah, it's amazing when you read what these experts are saying, and then you go back to seeing what the Prophet and the example of the Imams is, you see that it all makes great sense. He says it takes a lot of perseverance and training to respond to anger with kindness. When you intensely and consistently focus on your spiritual values and goals, you increase the blood flow to your brain. And anterior cingulated, which causes the activity and emotional centers of the brain to decrease. Conscious intention is the key. And the more you focus, the more you can take charge of your life. Niyyah, intention. The intention is the most important thing. Inna al-a'mala bin-niyat. Your actions are all dependent on your intentions. The intention to take control of your anger is the most important step towards a fulfilled life. You need to recognize the things that will make you angry. And you need to consciously take control of those things before they take control of yourself. And I just wanted to conclude with two examples. And we'll answer the final question. The final question we wanted to answer is, are Muslims more angry than other religions? Well, historically, when we look at the example of Islam, we find that actually Muslims and the example of the Prophet shows probably the most gentle example towards people who have caused this anger. At the conquest of Mecca, so all of you remember that there was a violation of the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. And what happened is the kuffar killed some of the Muslim believers. And the Muslims had the right, because the kuffar violated the treaty, the Muslims had the right to attack the kuffar, because that was one of the components of the treaty. But the Prophet ﷺ, he chose to give general amnesty, to give general forgiveness to the entire city of Mecca and to the entirety of the kuffar. So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ went into the city of Mecca with 10,000 Muslim soldiers, but not a single person was killed on the day that Mecca was conquered by the Muslimin. Not a single drop of blood was shed during the conquest of Mecca. There were 10 people who were subject to death because they had violated some murder treaties, and they had murdered some people previously. But the Prophet forgave most of them, and he only ended up, they only ended up committing capital punishment on 3 of the people that were originally supposed to be, taken care of, that were not really covered by the amnesty. So here in the example of the Prophet, we have an example of when the Prophet was in a position of dominance, but he chose to forgive, and he forgave people like Hind. You know Hind. She's the wife of Abu Sufyan. What did she do? She ate the liver of his beloved uncle Hamza. But the Prophet even forgave Hind. He didn't kill her. He had the right to kill her, blood money, diya, but he didn't. He chose to forgive her, and he overlooked her transgressions on that day. This is the example of the Prophet. This is the only bloodless revolution, historically speaking, that we can find. After every revolution, there's a period of tremendous bloodshed. Read your history. After the French Revolution, there was someone named Robespierre who was in charge of the guillotine. They killed thousands of people. After the American Revolution, when the Americans conquered the British, there were thousands of British who were killed. After the Russian Revolution, millions of people were killed. After the Chinese Revolution, millions of people were killed. After the Islamic Revolution, the conquest of Mecca by the Prophet and 10,000 soldiers under his command, not a single drop was shed on the day of the conquest of Mecca. Find me another historical example which is similar to this example of the Prophet and his ability to forgive and to forget and to control his anger. I challenge anyone. So historically speaking, Muslims are really not that angry when we compare it to other religions. Now I want to give you another example, and this is a modern day example, and I don't know how many of you have heard this, but we'll conclude with this example. And I wanted to show you some statistics, but time is running out. But I just wanted to show you the example of a modern-day Muslim who actually chose to forgive and to forget. It's a man named Rais Vuyan. Rais Vuyan was a gas station clerk in Texas. After September 11, he was working in the gas station, and there was a crazy man. After September 11, there was a crazy Texan who went out with a shotgun, and he went out and he decided to shoot people. Anyone who looked brown, he wanted to kill him. He wanted to shoot him because he thought that all brown people were Muslims. So he went into the gas station of Rais Vuyan, and he shot him in the face with 42 bullets, 42 pellets right in the face. This is what Rais Vuyan looked like after he was shot in the face with 42 bullets. This is several weeks after he was shot in the face. So he went to the hospital, and this man wanted to kill him, a crazy man wanted to kill him, simply for the fact that he was a Muslim. And Rais Vuyan, this is several weeks after he was treated at the hospital, he was taken to the hospital, and he was treated for his injuries, and then he was let go after one day because he didn't have medical insurance. So imagine being shot in the face with 42 bullets, and then not having any medical insurance, and then having to go out. So what they did is they charged the man who did these shootings with capital murder. They wanted to kill him, capital punishment. But Rais Vuyan, he wanted to forgive this man. And this is what he said. He said, "I was raised very well by my parents and teachers. They raised me with good morals and strong faith. They taught me to put yourself in others' shoes. Even if they hurt you, don't take revenge. Forgive them. Move on. It will bring something good to you and them. My Islamic faith teaches me this too." He said he did this act as an act of war, and a lot of Americans wanted to do it. He's talking here about the shooter. He's saying, I'm putting my position in the American shooter's position. Many people wanted to do this thing, but I understand his position. After it happened, I was just simply struggling to survive in this country. I decided that forgiveness was not enough, that what he did was out of ignorance. I decided I had to do something to save this person's life. So the state of Texas wanted to execute this man. Rais Vuyan, shot in the face with 42 bullets, said, no, I want to forgive this man because this man is an ignorant man. This man is a man that does not know anything about Islam. And he was just simply reacting on an emotional level after September 11. So the killer, a man named Mark Stroman, he says, this is his response, and this was all in the New York Times, you can look it up. They had this interview between the two people. He says, Mr. Rais Vuyan, what an inspiring soul. For him to come forward after what I've done speaks volumes, and has really touched my heart and the heart of many others worldwide. Rais Vuyan, who is a survivor of my hate, his deep Islamic beliefs have gave him the strength to forgive the unforgivable. That is truly inspiring to me, and should be an example for us all. The hate has to stop. We are all in this world together. This is what the man, the killer, said about Rais Vuyan, the Muslim, who was shot in the face with 42 bullets. Now the man was actually executed about 2 weeks ago because the state of Texas didn't follow the request of Rais Vuyan, and they said, no, this man is worthy of death because he killed 2 other people and he wanted to kill you. But the message being, how many in this room, raise your hand, how many in this room have actually heard of this man, Rais Vuyan? Okay, we have a few people. But the majority of you have unfortunately never heard of this man. Why is that? The media doesn't cover these types of individuals in daily affairs. I looked up the Fox News website. There was only one mention of this man. And they didn't even mention the fact that he wanted to forgive his killer. We're always depicting Muslims as angry people, but the reality of the situation is that Muslims are often the focus of much of the anger around us. And I just wanted to conclude with just some statistics, and then we'll conclude it for the night, inshallah. The FBI had a report in the year 2006, and the name of the report was called Terrorism, 2002 to 2005. And what the FBI did in this report is they listed all of the terrorist acts that occurred in the United States from the year 1980 to the year 2005. Every single terrorist act from 1980 to 2005 was listed in this report. And the graph of the people who committed these acts is shown here. 42% of domestic terrorism was actually committed by Latino terrorist groups. 5% was by communist groups. 7% was by Jewish extremist groups. 24% was by extreme left-wing groups, and 16% was by others, including Christian groups and other non-affiliated groups. Look, what is the smallest percentage of people after the communists? Islamic extremists. The smallest percentage of terrorist events in the United States, according to the FBI, between the 1980 and 2005, were committed by Islamic terrorist events. Now, yes, you may say that the events of September 11 caused a tremendous amount of casualties, and we agree, a tremendous amount of innocent casualties. But that was just an unusual event in the large history of terrorism, both in the United States and abroad. So to conclude, anger is an important emotion. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the blessing of anger because it allows us to survive in certain high-stress situations. But if we don't control our anger, lack of control of anger leads us to go away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and more importantly, it leads us to commit injustice against other people. The solution to anger is to change our perspective, to remember that in the grand scheme of things, we're only servants of Allah. So maybe someone does something wrong to us, but still in the end, maybe they did it out of ignorance. We should give them the benefit of the doubt. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give us the greatest award. If we believe in Allah, then we should at least have rahmah for our fellow Muslims. Many of us, we try to continue arguments between each other. This man, shot in the face with 42 bullets, was willing to forgive his murderer. How many of us are willing to forgive people who have hurt us? If you're willing to forgive, try to take the first step tonight. Go home. Think of someone who's done you wrong, and try to take the first step towards forgiving them. And not just ghafar, but afu. Forgive them and forget them, and try to establish good relations. This is the month of Ramadan, the month of uniting everyone. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to control our anger, to allow us to unite as a community. ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا وأخطأنا ربنا ولا تحمل علينا أصلا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا ربنا ولا تؤاخذنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون سلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين صلوات